Hi, I'm Roger Williams, and welcome to the OSU Extension Show. On today's show, we want to talk about picking a garden site. Starting a first-year garden, that can mean a lot of different things to different people. Maybe you've bought a piece of ground, put a house on it, and you want to have a garden, and there's never been a garden there before. Or maybe you moved into a house, and there used to be a garden somewhere, and you're wanting to revamp that and start having a garden there. Lots of places in Cherokee County, while there's not really but one place maybe on the entire property to have a garden, and that may not be too good anyway. So whatever your situation is, well, you just have to deal with it. There's a lot of raised bed gardens in the area, and that's because there isn't any place to have a real good garden that's right in the ground like so many other areas in different areas of the country might have. A lot of places, raised bed garden means that you just pull the soil up into a pile and you have it there. With us, we know raised bed means you have to put some kind of container and you have to bring the soil in and try to make your raised bed garden. But today we're in this location, and on this piece of property, this is the only place to have a garden. And there has been a garden here in the past. From looking at a lot of things around this location, it was probably a pretty productive garden. The people enjoyed landscape and gardening and probably did a lot of things right. But the number one thing when you're talking about putting in a garden is sunlight, because you got to have soil and you got to have sunlight, and if you can bring the soil in, you still got to have sunlight. Now, the fact that I'm standing in the shade now means that this isn't really the best place to have a garden, but at the same time, if it's the only place you got, you just have to deal with it. Probably when this was a garden years ago, a lot of the trees weren't quite to the size that they are now, and so they didn't have to deal with it. They had more sunlight than what we're going to have now. And of course, you can always cut limbs out of trees and cut trees down, but some of the trees you just don't want to cut down, and so you just have to deal with it. One thing to remember when you're talking about growing plants in shade, growing garden vegetables in shade, if you're talking about leafy vegetables like spinach and lettuce and things like that, they grow better in shade than any of the other plants. Not that they grow good, because sunlight is the fuel that feeds the plants. But the spinach and stuff like that will do better than the other ones. Next in line is the root crops. Beets, radishes, potatoes, things like that. They'll grow a little bit better in shade than some of the other things. But if you're talking about tomatoes and okra, cucumbers, squash, things like that, that's the fruit that you pick, generally those don't do too good in shade, and you like to have at least 6 hours of sunlight in order to grow those, and that's pretty much a minimum. So this garden is going to need a little bit of change in some of the shade in order to really be productive, but it'll do for today, because we want to just talk about how to put in a garden, things to do and not to do whenever you're going to be starting a garden location. And this is an area, like I said, that is the only place on this property that you can really probably have a garden, so we're going to just deal with it. In order to plant a garden, you really got to start off and figure out what kind of soil you do have. Like I said, a lot of people have to have a raised bed garden because they just don't have good soil. And here I've dug a couple of holes with post hole diggers. You can use a shovel or just whatever, where you can get into the ground and figure out what type of soil you got. Not many rocks, not really too clay. This soil is probably pretty good for as Cherokee County goes. Of course, there's a lot of things here that need to be mowed off and tilled in. A lot of things that, since this has not been a garden for all these years, are going to be weeds, even though maybe these iris plants in the past were probably pretty good flower bed in here, and back on in here was probably a vegetable garden. But we're just going to have to deal with all that, because like I said, this is the only place on the property that is level enough and got enough soil and even sunlight. Even though we're not good here, there's a lot of places on this property that could be a whole lot worse from the shade standpoint. So we're going to do what we can here to kind of have a garden, and want to kind of take a look at a lot of the concerns that you might have if you were going to be putting a garden out. Of course, we talked about the sunlight. That's only one thing from the trees. Another thing is just the competition from the roots. Most of these trees here have grown to be as tall as the second story on that house, and they probably have roots that come out about as far as what they are tall. So we're probably standing in the drip line of most of these trees, and this was absolutely not a place to have a garden until we had the recent ice storm. Broke a lot of things down, and so probably going to end up having to do a lot more cutting here before really get it to be a productive garden. But that's one thing that we just can't get around. But as long as we know that that's going to be the problem, why we can at least deal with it. So we got the sunlight, we got the roots from the trees, we got them sapping for moisture, and we got them sapping for fertilizers that we put out. So we know that we're going to be in playing catch up on this deal. So we want to do a lot of other things right. No, we've got pretty good structure of soil, but it's been a long time since this was a garden. So we want to pull a few soil samples so we'll know kind of where we're at. A lot of the people probably didn't soil sample in the past, may have soil sampled, but a lot of things in a garden that's been a garden before, somebody might have dumped a little something here or there, cleaned out a flower pot. Of course, that would be good fertilities that they've just dumped somewhere, dumped a little bit of manure, done whatever. So I know this is probably extremely variable, so when we take our soil samples, we'll take a little extra effort to be able to know that we got a good job of soil sampling. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back.